Good day, scholars. I am Dr. Twyla Williams, and I love research. You have made it to the Qualitative Method and Designs course for doctoral students. Congratulations. Starting in week one, we will be exploring the qualitative research method, which is essential for an in-depth understanding of complex phenomena within a social science environment, humanities, or even other various disciplines. During this course, I will be speaking to you each week and briefly discussing some of the concepts that are contained within that week's actual assignments, discussions, and just giving you some extra information to kind of help you throughout the week. I must note that for the purposes of this particular course, when we refer to the word method, we are specifically speaking of qualitative or quantitative only. When referring to the word design, we are speaking of the types of qualitative research under the umbrella of the qualitative method. Furthermore, I don't want you to get confused because when you go to start to look for articles, journals, resources, do readings, you will find that seasoned researchers oftentimes interchange these two words of method and design. So please do not be confused. For the purposes of this course, we are very, very specific for you to understand the difference between a method and a design. So please keep that in mind as you go throughout this course. The qualitative research method focuses on meanings, experiences, subjective perspectives of individuals, and it differs significantly from the quantitative research method. The quantitative research method emphasizes numerical data and statistical analyses, and that's not what we are intending to do in qualitative method. Keep in mind that although you may be conducting a quantitative study, it is still very important for you to understand the dynamics of qualitative method covered in this course, because you will have to justify your methodological choice. And what better way to do that than to speak knowledgeably about the alternative? And so the same reigns true for doctoral learners who are choosing the qualitative method that we're talking about in this course. They will have to be well versed on the characteristics of the quantitative method, which they will speak of or they will learn about in another course, just as you will. And they will have to be able to justify their choice by being able to compare and contrast it to the quantitative method. So let's start by giving a brief overview of some of the characteristics of the qualitative research method. Some of them we can start with naturalistic inquiry, okay? Natural environments. Qualitative research is often conducted in real world environments and settings where people actually work and live. And so that's where that natural piece comes from. Another item that we can always look for in the qualitative method is that we have descriptive data. And that descriptive data generates rich descriptions that provide some insight into the participants' perspectives, because that's what we're looking at, their perspectives and their descriptions. And we're talking to people. We can also find emergent design in qualitative research. And what that means is that qualitative research is somewhat flexible in the sense of it can evolve according to what we are finding in our studies. The study can accommodate new findings. And that's one of the great things about qualitative research. And then lastly, we can think about the subjectivity component of qualitative method. Researcher presence, interpretation of what they are finding, the interaction with the participants are often acknowledged as part of the research process. So that's another characteristic of the qualitative method. When talking about the qualitative method, there's also several different types of data sources that we usually see. The number one would be interviews, and I consider interviews to be the staple of qualitative research. You will almost always find interviews if you don't find anything else. And so these interviews are usually in-depth, one-on-one conversations that allow for deep exploration of individual experiences and opinions. And these interviews usually last about 60 minutes or more on average. We also can find as a data source in qualitative method focus groups. And focus groups are just guided descriptions with groups of people, and they have a platform to be able to share their diverse perspectives on a topic. This particular process takes a little bit longer, maybe about 90 minutes or more, because you have more people that need to give their opinion and speak. The thing about focus groups, though, is that you have to be careful to make sure that everybody can be heard, even those who may be a little bit hesitant to speak. You have to give them a platform to speak. Observations are another way that we collect data in the qualitative method. Direct observations of participants in those natural environments. Remember, we talked about the naturalistic component. Well, how do these participants interact when you're observing them in their natural environments? And then we can capture the context of that behavior and be able to put it down on paper and come to some certain findings from that. Another data source that you will find in qualitative research would be content analysis. Content analysis is analyzing existing documents. Are there any types of documents in an entity that are used to gauge performance? Are there any documents where participants may have to document what's going on in their area? Are there any type of scales, tests, surveys that they've already taken? And so you can go in and you can take these existing documents, text, media, pictures, and you can identify patterns and themes and biases even in these documents. And so it helps us to be able to analyze the content qualitatively. And then lastly, another way that we can capture data through a data source is through case studies. This should not be excused or confused with the actual case study design. But what we can do is we can look at single cases or multiple cases and within a real world context, come up with findings or conclusions from looking at those different cases. And so we talked about the actual types of data sources, but there's also some data techniques that we can use to enhance those data sources. One of these is what I call semi-structured interviews, very similar to the interview, except for more open-ended questions, not as structured, and the participants have more leeway to be able to speak. So it's a type of interview. We can also, to enhance our observation, use the field notes. Okay. So these are detailed notes taken during the observations, and we capture both objective facts and subjective impressions. And we put it on paper, and that helps to inform our actual analysis of the data that we're collecting. And then lastly, we can enhance our data collection with digital tools. And this could be audio or video recordings. It can enhance data accuracy. We can check. However, we have to be very careful about the ethical considerations surrounding letting the participants know that we're actually utilizing audio and video. Another item about qualitative method that we can speak about is actual data analysis techniques. And there's a lot, but analysis is crucial. Some common approaches would be thematic analysis. I'm sure you've heard of this many times. And that is identifying and analyzing patterns or themes within qualitative data. We can also use grounded theory, and this is where we develop theories based on the data we've collected, and we make those connections. And grounded theory is actually a type of design in qualitative research, which we'll talk a little bit about. However, this type of analysis is really reserved for really seasoned researchers more oftentimes than not, but we'll talk a little bit about it in this course later. We also have framework analysis, and this can be done through a predefined conceptual framework or theory. When we analyze data, we take the components of that theory, we utilize it in the study, and that's what we're doing a lot of in this particular course. We're using that type of analysis. And then lastly, narrative analysis. And that's when we examine the stories that people tell to understand their experiences and give meanings to ascribe meaning to the experiences that they're sharing with us. So now that we've talked about that, We can also speak to trustworthiness and rigor in qualitative research. Very, very important concept. Trustworthiness is made up of four components, and you will have to write about this in your actual dissertation. I'll briefly go over those four components just to kind of give you a snippet of what they mean. But trustworthiness is vital. It is very, very key in qualitative method. The first component of trustworthiness would be credibility. And credibility is when we ensure that our findings are credible and reflect the actual participant perspectives. And one way that we check that is through what we call member checking. And that means we literally send the transcripts back to the participants and they validate whether that particular transcript is correct or not, and they can make corrections. Second component of trustworthiness is transferability. And this is when we provide sufficient context so that others can determine the applicability of our findings in other settings. Okay, so can we transfer our findings to other settings? That's very important in qualitative research that we can transfer some of these findings and see that they can be applicable somewhere other than in our own study. The third component would be dependability. And this is basically maintaining a clear, systematic process that can be followed by others. And so that's the chapter 3, which is supposed to be extremely detailed. And the reason being is that another researcher should be able to come behind us, read our chapter 3, and replicate our study if they chose to do so. And so that's where that dependability concept comes from. And then lastly, confirmability. The fourth part of trustworthiness in qualitative method is confirmability. And this is when we ensure the findings are shaped by the participants' input rather than our bias. And so we should be able to confirm that actually what is in our study is true and that we have not interjected or seasoned it with our own biases. And so we have to put different measures in place to make sure that doesn't happen, such as having colleagues check your work, journaling, and bias checking on a regular basis. So finally, another component that I wanted to speak about when it came to qualitative method is let's talk a little bit about the ethical considerations. Now, in all research, ethical considerations are huge. However, these are some items that I just want to highlight so that you can be aware of them. And we will talk about them every time we talk about any type of method or design because ethics are so important. First of all, informed consent. Participants should be well informed about the research, its purpose, and their role in the research. Very, very clear, well informed, details and informed on this. Confidentiality. Researchers should protect the participants to the best of their ability, protect their identities, protect the data, and put processes in place to make sure that that happens. And we also need to ethically think about the cultural sensitivity and understand and respect the cultural aspects or context of participants. It's essential for us to be able to ethically conduct our research. So we need to be aware of that and the actual environments in which we are conducting our studies. So, in conclusion, the qualitative research method really provides us with some invaluable insights into the human experience and social phenomena, it enriches our understanding beyond just numerical data. Although quantitative method has its place, it's black and white in a lot of ways. And qualitative just gives us a little color in between the lines. It gives us the story behind the numbers. It encourages us to adapt, just as I spoke before. It allows us to adapt the research according to what the findings are and to be able to delve deeper into the experience of the participants, depending on that. So, in short, I just want to thank you for your attention. These were just a few items to cover as far as the qualitative research method is concerned. For further information on the qualitative research method, see your week 1 required and recommended readings for this week. Again, I am Dr. Twyla Williams, and I will talk to you later this week.